I'm Torrie K, and here before me are all these painting supplies because today I'm attempting my first ever painting. Now when I say my first ever painting, I'm talking about a painting that actually uses shadings and acrylic work. I've actually done some like paint and sip painting with friends, which those in my opinion don't really count because it's like a guided kind of painting demonstration. I've also done a little bit of work with ink washes, which is like watercolor, but with inks. I have never taken it upon myself to attempt an acrylic painting. I have drawn quite a bit in the past, but I've really been terrified to use paints. I've actually been inspired to paint by a lot of the YouTubers I watched, namely Banana Jamana or Jamie Jo. And I watched her tutorials a lot, and so I feel like I'm equipped with some amount of knowledge, but I've never done any of these techniques on my own. So I'm especially worried about shadows because I feel that's where it's going to really trip me up. And I'm also worried that I won't have adequate brush control when I'm actually trying to get more of the detailed work in. So for today's painting, since it is the start of spooky season, I'm going to be doing Mickey and Minnie on the back of a little pumpkin. Now this is not from my own head. This will be referenced from a Disney clip art, but I don't intend to sell this picture for money or anything like that. I'm simply doing this as just to get my practice up, and hey, maybe I'll have a little bit of artwork for the home. So I have my handy dandy blue pencil right here, and I know from watching Jamie Jo's channel that it's very important to use a color pencil to sketch out your drawing when you're going to be painting, because if you use a regular graphite pencil, it kind of bleeds into the paint and can kind of distort your paint colors a little bit. I have the rest of my supplies, and I think I'm about ready to start. So, wish me luck. If you're wondering why my sleeves changed color, yes, I did change clothes. Actually, you'll see my sleeve color change several times. Even though this painting probably took a total of 4 to 5 hours, I had to work on it during my spare time after work over a period of about several days. Sketch done, I'm moving on to the first paint layer. Going into this project, I had no idea how to shade, so I had to try several different approaches. My first plan was to paint the lighter colors first, then add the darker shadows on top after it dried. You can see with these leaves how terribly wrong that plan went. What I didn't realize is that paint only blends together if both the darker and lighter shades are both wet. Otherwise it just sits on top and looks very unnatural, kind of like a paint by numbers blocky look. Also, the shadows I mixed were too dark in the first place. Moving on to Mickey, I did a better job with lightening the colors I was using, but I still didn't realize I needed to blend the colors together. This is especially noticeable when you look at the shading around his mouth. On Minnie, I finally began to use blending techniques. This time, I added less of the darker shadow paint and incorporated it onto the canvas using the lighter base color. I'm probably not explaining this concept very well, but I'll demonstrate it when I get to the pumpkin shading. The pumpkin part ended up being decently shaded and almost properly blended. What I learned here was to put several paints onto my palette, then take a bit from each color that I needed and mix them separately to make the shadow color. When I applied the shadow onto the base color, I then incorporated the lighter base color also so that the two blended a bit more seamlessly. Now, I don't know if this technique is proper. I'm very much an amateur artist, but in my very limited experience, literally this one painting, I found that this technique worked for me. I opted to add a simple partial background. For this, I mixed a bit of water into my color to give it somewhat of a watercolor look.
Water can be mixed with acrylic to make the paint lighter and more runny. I just added droplets of water until I was happy with the thickness. When painting the background, I purposely left the edges rough and uneven to give it, I hope, a look of playful chaos. Finally, I added the most important touch to any work of art, my artist's signature. After the paint was thoroughly dry, it was time to gloss it with a sealant. Sealing an acrylic painting brings out more vibrancy in the paint, gives it a shine, protects it, and just makes it look more finished. And there you have it.
Okay, so my painting has officially dried and been varnished, so I think this is a good time to talk about what I felt about the whole process. I'm not half displeased with it. I think for my first painting, I'm honestly surprised it came out as good as it did. I was actually expecting it to be a lot harder than it was. Me looking at my painting, I kind of find it funny to notice like my first, second, and third, fourth attempts at shading, because you see here first my little leaves here, my first attempt at shading, pretty bad. Then I follow that up with Mickey, and yeah, Mickey, like his hands and everything, I'm not too happy with. I think that they look kind of putty-ish. I don't know, it's too dark of a shading. And even his face, it kind of looks like he's wearing a little bit of a 5 o'clock shadow here. Minnie came out much better. I think that her shading, especially underneath the hat brim, I think that came out pretty decent. And I like the little shading around her hat buckle here. I think that was cute. And then the pumpkin. And the pumpkin came out pretty close to how I imagined it to look. I really liked the little glow effect that I used, the like fluorescent yellow to make kind of the glow effect, and I was really happy with that. I was very hesitant to add the background. I really chicken out at doing any kind of backgrounds. Even when I do sketches, I don't like to do the background because I'm always worried that I'm going to mess up what I did in the actual picture. But I think that adding the background was a really good decision because it gives the picture some kind of fullness and it just looks a little bit more finished. And I'm not displeased at all. Honestly, this has given me a lot more courage to try to paint other projects. I'm used to using a lot of color pencils, and color pencils, it takes so long to get the color to look the way you want it. But with paint, pretty much if you want it to, if you want to just take the color straight from the bottle and apply it to the canvas, that's the color it's going to be. You don't have to keep on applying tons and tons of layers like you do with color pencil. And the brush control part, of course, I have room for improvement, but I didn't find it as difficult to use a paintbrush as I thought it would. It wasn't all that much different than using a pencil, with the exception of the fact that you did need to use a lighter touch. Another thing with the shading, that's the part, like I think that my control itself with the brush isn't horrible, but I just need more work on the shading. I just need to learn how to blend the colors a little bit better. And the biggest lesson that I learned while doing this is that when you're going to add some kind of shading, it's better to go lighter than darker. Always go basically a shade lighter than you would expect it to look. Because sometimes when you put even like what you think is a very, very light brown on your picture, it may come out a bit, or like in her case, way too dark. So it's better to start out with a lighter shade and build up. That was my biggest takeaway. The second takeaway is just to have fun. Just experiment, have fun. Don't take it too seriously. When I first started the painting, I mean, my hand was almost shaking. I was so nervous, and there was really nothing to be that intimidated about. It's not this skill that only a very, very select few have. Anyone can build up a painting skill, and I think that basically practice is the key to just doing well at any art form. And I'm definitely going to keep painting some more and hopefully be making more art videos. So in the comments, I would greatly appreciate it if you had any kind of art suggestions, art tips, if you could leave those in the comments. Also, if you'd like, you can go ahead and rate what you think of my beginner attempt at painting. Give me from a 1 to a 10, please. I appreciate you watching very much, and look out for more Halloween themed videos. Also, if you could please subscribe and like this video if you haven't already. Until next time, see you soon. Bye!